Hey everybody. Oh look, you can't see my mouth moving, but you can see my abstract art. 'Cause baby, it's abstract. Hi! It's Leanne the lawyer again today. How are you? I hope you're doing great. Again, I mentioned this before, but I feel like you and we have a bond, so I thought I'd share my art with you. Um, but because I was thinking about abstract of titles, and I know that's our topic for today. And I thought, surely there's more things that are abstract than just the law. And people think we lawyers are so stuffy and that we just don't get things like art. But I know you see my art. Do you feel my art? And you're going to feel abstract of titles the same way. It's going to grab your heart and your soul. So let's get started on the discussion because I don't want to delay you. And I know you have time not to spare, but to spend doing abstract of titles. You would rather be doing that. First, I want to tell you what an abstract of title is. That would be helpful, right? It's not abstract art. It is a document that is put together. It basically is a summary of a piece of property going all the way back to its origin. Now, you hear a lot of people talk about title exams and title searches. Title exams and title searches go back 40 to 60 years. That is something that is required before you have a real estate transaction. If somebody wants to borrow money from a mortgage lender, you're going to have to do that title exam. They want some assurances that you're actually getting a clear title on a piece of property. An abstract of title is also something that might be required in certain circumstances, but I need you to understand this is going to take you all the way back to the origin. It's not only going back 40 years on a piece of property and looking to see who owned it and who had it. This goes back to the actual time when the original land grant was given to the state in which you live. Okay, so the abstract example that's been provided to you in your course, I believe, is South Dakota. And the very first entry there says grant, and it shows you whenever that piece of property, that parcel, was actually granted to the state of South Dakota from the United States of America. That's how far back we go on these abstract of titles. So it's going to vary by the state in which you live and when that state actually got that property from the federal government. Okay, so again, this is going to be something that it is time consuming, and that is why most defects in title have been cured. So that's why we only go back 40 to 60 years, because prior to that, most of the people involved in those transactions or most of those disputes and those claims, those people are dead. Let's just be frank, they're gone. They've passed away. But again, in certain circumstances, and since we're going to be moving into some oil and gas and some mineral transactions, you need to understand how to go all the way back to the origin. So the abstract of title, so got it clear, goes back to the origin. You're going to see some entries in there. And again, it is just a summary of where this property has been since man started walking on it. And we're organized in our federal government and our state government what happened to it and who owned it and what were those conveyances, what was going on. It basically tells a story. So in that example that you have in your course, it starts out with when the United States granted that property to South Dakota, and then it moves through and comes all the way up through present day. And you can see it's kind of fascinating if you like mystery stories, if you like anything where you're like, oh gee, what happens at the end? Just start at the beginning. So it's like a story. So some of the things that you're going to see in the entries, this is what's going to be in each entry. First of all, you're going to have the parties, who is involved. So that grant entry that I was talking about, that very first entry, the parties involved would have been the United States and the state of South Dakota. Those were the two people involved in the transaction. And the first one said United States to the state of South Dakota. So you can see that it transferred from the United States to South Dakota. And that's how all the entries are going to be when you're transferring property from one person to another. The other thing that you're going to have is dates. You're going to have the dates of when that actually happened, what was recorded in the actual document, and then when it was actually filed with the county courthouse. Because what you're going to find in an abstract title, everything has been filed. And so that's going to be included in the entry. You're also going to have the book and the page number of where you're going to be able to actually locate that in a physical book in the courthouse. And then below that, a very, very short summary, a description of what happened, whether the property was conveyed or whether something else happened. Okay? So some common types of entries that you're going to see. Well, that first one, that one called grant, there's only going to be one, because after it was granted the first time, it's not going to be granted again. So what follows that? You're going to see entries that are called deeds. Obviously, we know what a deed is. You're going to have entries that are contracts. Generally, this is a contract for the sale of the land. So let's say, for example, you move into a house and you don't have the money to buy it, but you want the option to buy. So you're going to pay rent with the option to buy. So let's say you're paying $500 a month, and if you make all of your payments in 10 years, you will have basically paid for that land. And if you have a contract for a deed, at the end of that 10 years, then a deed would be executed, and you would then own that property. Okay, so you're going to see those types of contracts as entries. You're also going to see court cases, and those are going to be styled as, in the circuit court of whatever county. And you're going to see the parties listed, the dates, and then it's going to be a description of what happened in that particular court case. This is when somebody gets sued. It could be because someone who is one of the owners of the property finds themselves in a lawsuit and a judgment is entered against them. You'll also see court cases when somebody dies and probate comes in and you're having to probate the estate. You'll see like in re the estate of dead person, and then it'll show what the disposition of the property was there. You'll also see entries for easements. So anytime that property was, an easement was created on that property. Easements are things like allowing somebody to go across your property for some reason. Many, many times they're things like driveways. Okay, so your neighbor needed a way to get from the road to his property, which was behind yours. So you would have created an easement for him. That would be included as an entry. And again, these are all done in chronological order from the grant, from the origin of the property all the way up through present day. So you're literally just following a timeline. There's going to be things in there like mortgages. So anytime somebody borrowed money against the property, it's going to be in there. All the details about the mortgage are going to be included in the entry, like how much money was to be paid and when was the final due date. You're also, anytime you have a judgment entered against somebody or you do have a mortgage, at some point that's going to be paid off and that's going to be satisfied. So you're going to see an entry called satisfaction. In modern times we call those releases. So you're either going to see a satisfaction or release, and in that entry it's going to show how a previous judgment, previous money that was owed, or a previous mortgage that was owed has now been satisfied. It's now been paid. That is no longer a lien against the property. And then the last thing you'll probably see is something called an assignment of mortgage. So let's say Bank of America. You borrow money from Bank of America as your mortgage. Well, Bank of America doesn't necessarily keep your mortgage forever. Sometimes they'll assign it. They will sell it to another mortgage lender. Maybe they'll sell it to Wells Fargo. And now, instead of writing out your monthly mortgage payment to Bank of America, you're writing it to Wells Fargo. Usually, you don't have any say when that happens. It is Bank of America's prerogative if they want to assign or sell your mortgage to somebody. It doesn't really impact you other than you're writing your check to somebody else. However, that is all recorded at the courthouse, and that would be something that you would put in your abstract of title. So you're going to see that assignment of mortgage, and that's generally going to show transfer from one bank to another. Those are going to be the parties. In my example I just gave you would be United Bank to Wells Fargo. So I don't want you to be confused when you see those. So as you look through the example that we provided for you in this course, I want you to look at those with a fresh set of eyes. Understand it is not scary, it is not complicated. It is a story about what has happened to that property and the people who lived on that property. And you'll see, since it goes back to the origins, sometimes these people pass away. And you're moving on to new people. So good luck, have fun tracing the history of the property, and that's all I've got on abstracts of title.